Okay, relax. You're not going to get a lecture. You're going to get some stories. You know, man, so, y'all understand me?
Yes.
Okay. It's a story of grace. It's a story about waking up. I didn't always know. Do you think when I became a nun and started teaching that I was going to go to death row? I mean, who chooses to go to death row? But you wake up. Life happens. You get invitations. And that's what happened. That's what River of Fire is telling the whole story about waking up. The last page of River of Fire is the first page of Dead Man Walk. But there's a journey in there. As all of us on a journey. So I want to take you over, when you think of the cross, this cross, by the way, was made by a prisoner from aluminum cans and twine, and it has two arms on it. And the gospel of Jesus stretches us. So we have capital punishment. And then we have these great arguments about why we need capital punishment. I mean, of course we need capital punishment. I mean, some of these people that do these crimes, unspeakable crimes, killing people in a synagogue, going in a theater in Aurora, Colorado, killing a whole bunch of people. Look, we reserve the death penalty for terrible crimes like that. We're not doing a death penalty for everybody that murders everybody, only for the really, really, really terrible, heinous murders. Because, I mean, think of it. Do those people deserve to live? The victims of death, look at the family. How can we say they deserve to live? Yeah, and then they're going to be in prison for life. They're going to get 3 hots in a cot every day. And we're going to put taxpayers' money into keeping those people alive? And they're victims of death? Of course we need the death penalty for them. That's how we got the death penalty in the United States. And we were also made to be afraid. You don't terminate these guys, because all they know is to kill. They're going to kill guards in prison. They're going to kill other inmates. You got to fight fire with fire. They kill, we kill them. And that maybe can save 1 or 2 innocent people where somebody's thinking of killing them or killing the witnesses, and they go, hey, wait, I might die, and if it saves 1 life, it's worth it. Because a lot of these people are scum. They've been scum. They kill people and don't think anything of it. Of course we need the death penalty. I didn't think about the death penalty much. You know, when I was growing up, the traditional teaching of the Catholic Church, as it has been in most Christian churches, was that the state has a right to take life to protect society. And that goes way back in the history of the church, you know, way back to Augustine, 5th century, Thomas Aquinas, 12th century. Of course, in all those years, they didn't have prisons, they didn't have a way to defend society. And so they gave government the power to end violent people's lives in order to protect society. It's always about defense. It was never about, if you've ever been to a death penalty trial, of course in New York, you won't be going to death penalty trials. You did have a Catholic guy, George Pataki, that brought the death penalty back to New York for a while. And you say, isn't this interesting now? Catholic politicians going to bring the death penalty back to New York, where we haven't had the death penalty for years. And what was George Pataki saying as he ran for governor of New York, a good Catholic guy, went to Mass on Sunday? What was he saying? Oh, well, we need the death penalty for the terrible murders to protect people. Just the arguments I just gave you. And you know what? You had it in place for about 10 years. You spent millions of dollars. In the end, the Supreme Court overturned it because it wasn't constitutional anyway. It's a minefield when you say there are some crimes for which we can kill people in the United States. We can put our government in charge of killing some people because they don't deserve to. And you look at the record now, 30 plus years since Gregg v. Georgia was decided by the Supreme Court, where they set the criteria. It's only going to be for the worst of the worst. And then you look at the record, who actually has gotten the death penalty? You want to know the profile's really clear. Always poor people, never people with money. 8 out of every 10 people, because they kill white people. When people of color are killed in this country, which is over 50% of all the homicides, death penalty is seldom sought. But wait, isn't the criteria supposed to be the worst of the worst? But who decides what's the worst of the worst? I'm going to tell you, in Louisiana, it's always been pretty clear. The former states that practice slavery do 75% of all executions. So our little theoretical discussions that we have about the death penalty, it's only going to be for the people who do the terrible crimes. You have agencies and people that actually have to enforce it. And then where does it come down to? Isn't it interesting? The 10 southern states that practice slavery do over 75% of the actual executions. You haven't done one in New York in how many years? But the arguments were the same when George Pataki was running for government about why you needed the death penalty. Now all these arguments, let me tell you the stories. First of all, for me, when I was in high school, I never questioned the death penalty. The teaching was that the Catholic Church, we allowed it to defend society. Didn't think about it. Joined the sisterhood, became a teacher, and it was you're getting this, thank God, with a good Jesuit education about social justice. It took me, in fact, the whole book, The River of Fire, is about waking up that the gospel of Jesus isn't just about being charitable to people. It's about justice and being in solidarity with people that are oppressed and that don't have a voice and don't have rights. Because we're people of privilege. You can't be sitting in the school and not be a person of privilege. The gateway to everything is education. That's how you know who you are. That's how you know what your gifts are. That's your little gateway to go to whatever else you're going to do in your life. I had to wake up, and it's grace that wakes us up. We hear a talk. I heard a talk. This nun gave a talk. And it was by the time she finished that talk, she said, Jesus preached good news to the poor. I thought to myself, I know that. And I thought I knew what was coming next. Good news to the poor. What's good news to the poor that Jesus preached? Well, you are loved by the Father. God's like an honor, like a father. Every hair of your head is numbered. And one day you'll have a great reward in heaven. But integral, she said, to the message of Jesus to poor people. Well, it's not God's will for you to be poor, you suffer, and then one day you go to heaven. Integral to good news for poor people is you can be poor no longer. You have a right to work against the poverty that's holding you down and having your children die before they're 5 years old without health care and without the things that a human being needs. Integral to the good news was that you shall be poor no longer. And I mean, it clicked for me for the first time. And that's when I moved into the St. Thomas housing projects. And African American people became my teachers. Here I am, a white woman of privilege with a master's degree, and here I am for the first time living with people and being taught by African American people who've been our servants when I was growing up. I grew up in the Deep South, where the Jim Crow was still in place, where black people couldn't even sit on the bus with white people. Couldn't even in Sacred Heart Church sit in the pews with white people. Kids for their first communion, black kids couldn't receive their Holy Communion with white kids. And I never questioned it because it was just part of the culture. If something's part of the culture, you don't question it. And so when I moved into St. Thomas, African American people then became my teachers and taught me what it means. When you go in there, we'd see kids coming into the Adult Learning Center. Look at you. Those of you that are juniors. We had kids come into the Adult Learning Center to get their GED, who were juniors in high school and couldn't read a third grade reader. Because they were forced to go to those schools. They didn't have the choice to go to a good school like you. Like, why are you here? Why have you been selected to get a good education? And hopefully not just with your mind, hopefully with that flame in your soul, which is your faith, which is your soul. Don't picture pretty little Jesus with the curly hair, pink cheeks, sweet little Jesus. I mean, there's a sweet little Jesus, which we need to comfort us. But Jesus is a person of justice who calls us to be a person of justice. So what happened to me? Here I am in St. Thomas, and people are teaching me about how education works, how the police work, what it means not to be able to get a job simply because they look at the neighborhood in which you live and they don't trust you to get a job. Everything that I didn't know, I had never experienced it. And so it's while I was there at St. Thomas one day coming out of the Adult Learning Center, this is how Dead Man Walking begins. A friend of mine coming out of the Louisiana Coalition office sees me right there on St. Andrew Street, has a clipboard, has a project, says, "Hey, Sister Helen, you want to be a pen pal, somebody on death row?" I said, "Sure, yeah." I thought I was just going to be writing to somebody. We hadn't had an execution in Louisiana in over 20 years. There'd been a moratorium on that. I thought I was only going to be writing to somebody. You got to watch out for sneaky Jesus. I've got t-shirts now from places where I've given a talk, and I get a t-shirt back from the university, Sneaky Jesus, on the t-shirt. You want to know what I mean by sneaky? "Hey, Sister Helen, you want to write somebody on death row?" "Yeah, sure. I think I'm only going to be writing letters." You know what happened? He wrote back, and there was a relationship. That's what Pope Francis is always talking about, the gospel, an encounter. Meet somebody, get out, be there. And I meet him on death row. And I ended up being with him when he was executed, when he was electrocuted to death. Along the way, I meet his victims. Along the way, I meet a man who's done murder, he and his brother Eddie, killing of 2 teenage kids in cold blood, kids just like you. David LeBlanc, just 17, Loretta Bork, 18. Out by the sugarcane fields where kids would go to park. They had gone to a homecoming Catholic high football game in a little town of Thibodaux, Louisiana. Had gone by the cane fields that were just being harvested to park. And here these 2 brothers waited with guns. And they abducted these kids. One of them, at least, raped Loretta. And these kids are found lying face down by those there in that sugarcane field with bullet holes in the back of their heads. And then the journey begins for their families, their mothers, and their fathers, and sisters, and brothers, who had had a brother, who had had a sister alive. And then they have a sheriff's deputy at the door saying to their father, "We need you to come with us to identify your child at the morgue." And I'm going to visit the guy who did that deed. I made some mistakes. I made a really bad mistake with the victim's family. If you see the film Dead Man Walking, you see when I meet those victims' families, they are mad at me. And they have reason to be mad. Because you know what? I didn't know what to do with the victim's family. Here I am. I'm just meeting this guy, and he's going to be executed. I know about human rights. I know the state of Louisiana should be strapping a person down who's alive and killing them. But the victim's family was so mad. The prosecutor told them, anybody who gets the death penalty is your enemy. So I stayed away. I thought that's the best thing I could do for them is just stay away. Because they're so hurt. I don't know that kind of pain. I haven't lost my sister, my brother. I haven't lost a child. Stay away. Best thing I can do. Boy, they were furious when I meet them. As happens in the film, and as I tell in the book, I meet them at the worst possible time you could meet a victim's family. You know when it was? It was during the pardon board hearings. And it couldn't be more polarized. When you go into a pardon board hearing, the last step before a person's executed in Louisiana, you actually sign a book on which side you're on, life or death. And of course, there were just a few of us going to that pardon board meeting asking them not to execute Patrick Sonier because he and his brother were guilty of killing those kids. And I met him outside the building while the pardon board was voting. It couldn't have been worse. And one of the families whose daughter had been killed were furious at me. They saw me, they just averted their eyes, they walked past, they never spoke to me since. But right behind them, surprised by grace, you never know, was the father and mother of David LeBlanc. who had also been killed. And the father, Lloyd LeBlanc, he's the hero, by the way, of Dead Man Walking. I'm not, I'm the storyteller, and I made some bad mistakes. He walks right up to me and he goes, Sister Helen, I'm Lloyd LeBlanc. And he had just been in here with the victim's family. When they asked the victim's family what did they want to see this guy live or die, they asked for the execution. He had been the spokesperson under pressure. And now he is looking in my eyes, he's saying, Sister, where you been? All this time you've been visiting those brothers. I haven't had nobody to talk to, and Sister, you can't believe the pressure on us to be for the death penalty. Everybody was saying, Lord, you gotta be for the death penalty, man. You can't forgive this guy, because he was Catholic, he was Christian. He knew what Jesus said about forgiveness. And he said, Sister, where you been? And I said, Mr. Blanc, I'm so sorry, I didn't think you'd want to see me. And I had a great editor when I wrote Dead Man Walking. I downplayed this whole thing of not reaching out to victims. And he goes, Helen, it was cowardice, wasn't it? You were scared, weren't you? I go, oh, yeah. He said, put that in your book. When you write a book, you don't just take people on the peak of the waves when you do it all right. Bring them into where you made mistakes. Oh, what a mistake. And I said, Mr. Blanc, I'm sorry, I didn't think you'd want to see me. He said, Sister, I'll pray in this little chapel. Come pray with me. Keeps vigil before the Blessed Sacrament, St. Mark of Tours little chapel in St. Markville, Louisiana. And I go to pray with him from 4 to 5 in the morning. Keep vigil before the Blessed Sacrament. We kneel down together and we say the rosary together. And it's a Friday, so it's a sorrowful mystery of the rosary. It's a story of Jesus being condemned to death and Jesus being executed by the state. And I'm kneeling alongside a man who's living through those sorrowful mysteries of his own son's life. He is the hero of the book of Dead Man Walking, and the one who taught me why forgiveness, the journey to forgiveness. He said, Sister, most people, they say to me, Lloyd, forgiveness is weak. Looks like you condoning it. Kill my son, I forgive you. Like condoning it. But he said, here's the way I see it. He said, I had such anger in me, I want to take those two brothers with my bare hands. I'd wake up every morning and just filled with this anger. I'm going to kill them. And I'm watching what happens to my wife and my daughter, Vicky. David's dead. We had to change where David was buried so Eula, my wife, can visit his grave every morning to begin her day. I want to kill him. And then he said, I just noticed I was always angry all the time. I'm snapping at Eula, I'm snapping at Vicky, making her cry. I'm angry all the time. And I said, Jesus, you got to help me. And grace came. And then he said, and when he was telling me this, he went like this. I was angry all the time. I wanted to kill him. And then he put his hand up like this. And then he said, I said, they killed our boy, but I'm not going to let them kill me. Jesus, you got to help me. And then grace came. And he was the first person that taught me that forgiveness, look at the word, forgive, give before. Not being condoning what people have done, but it's saving your own life to give before. So the love in us is not overcome by the hatred and we lose our own lives. Because see, he said, Sister, I'm a kind person, I love to help people, and I was losing that. I was losing that. And I said, I'm not going to let him kill me too. And that was his decision of grace. And he began then to walk in a path. It's not something you do once. And maybe, please God, we don't have somebody who murdered somebody we love, but we know what it is to be hurt. We know what it is for somebody to hurt somebody we love. We know what it is to be angry and want to get even with them no matter what. We know what that is because it's part of being human. And the gospel of Jesus, the challenge of it, is going to be with us always. It's going to seem like an impossible demand, but it's coupled with unconditional grace for us to make. I mean, you're going to make some bad decisions along the way, but then there's that grace, there's that mercy. Life is new, pick it up again, and here we go. So in the end, because of Lloyd LeBlanc, I began to understand and can travel with victims' families. We started a group in New Orleans called Survive. I didn't change it for all victims' families across this country. I did one thing. But if we do one thing toward healing, one thing toward helping people, I well knew, and now I really know, that offering victims' families, now you wait, as was promised here in New York when you had the death penalty. Now you wait, maybe 10 years, 15 years, and we're going to call you. When it's time, you get to sit on the front row. You get to watch as the state of New York kills the person, killed your loved one, and that violence which you witness is going to heal you. Look at the calls for violence that's going on around this country. Around immigrants. Look at the calls for violence against groups of people. Look at the calls for violence that has just emerged in this country. And you got to be men of justice. You got to be men of the gospel. You got to be men of discernment of heart, as St. Ignatius taught us in the spiritual exercises. To be able to be persons of compassion, but to be people of justice. To see those calls, those dog whistles of racism in political rhetoric against groups of people, immigrants and Jews and Muslims. You gotta be able to hear that dog whistle, that code language, and recognize it for what it is, and to stand up to be a person for justice with people that don't have a voice, whose voters' rights across this country are being suppressed. All this is going on right now in this epic of history in which you live. I end up being with Pat, who was executed. I end up being with the victim's family. And I learned a little of the stretching of the cross that Jesus calls us not to choose sides, but to be on both sides. Always in mercy and compassion. In the execution chamber, when I walked in there with Pat and Sonia, where was Christ? Christ was, of course, with the victims, with David and Loretta that had been shot in the cane field, and were the innocent victims, and with their mother and father. But where's Christ in the execution chamber? With Pat. And as I found out also with the guards, did you ever think this was a whole new thing for me? I never thought of this. What happens to the guards, these people that have a job like at Louisiana State Penitentiary, who gotta be the ones who gonna take this person out of their cell at night and walk them down? They're strapped, they can't defend themselves, strap them down and kill them. What happens to them? So we've been at the death penalty 30 plus years. Now more and more stories are coming out about the guards and the wardens that had to do the killing for us. Because it's clear the person they're killing is utterly defenseless. They're strapped down, they cannot move a muscle, and we got to kill them. Now we justify it, because we say, oh, well, they killed. It's against the law, they kill. And so we're justified in killing them, but the people doing the deed, and I tell the story of Major Cootie, who was one of the people on the strap-down team in Louisiana, called me into his office after he had been through 5 executions, and he goes, "Sister, I'm going to have to quit this job." He said, "I know their crimes." Because he used to be the supervisor on the tier. He knew every one of the people on the tier. He said, "I know what they did. Some of their crimes are unspeakable, what they did." But boy, when you're close to it like this, and then you're going to be the one to strap them down and kill them in the most premeditated way, but you claim it's okay because it's legal. I come home and I sit in my lazy boy chair afterwards. I can't eat, I can't sleep. My wife knows not to talk to me because I know I helped kill a defenseless human being, and in my gut, I know that's wrong. And in the journey of the Catholic Church, which took us 1,600 years to arrive at the point where we have Pope Francis to change the catechism, think of all the dialogue that went into that. Suddenly you don't have a pope who wakes up one morning and says, I think I'm going to change the catechism on my death penalty thing. It's all that dialogue of 1,600 years of experiences of the guards coming through. Hey, we're killing, mean, is this really the defense of society? Hey, we got prisons to defend society. How do we justify in the Catholic Church that this is an act of defense? All that bubbling up from the experiences of the people. And so then you reach a point where you have Pope Francis saying, no more, no exceptions. No more can we ever say to the government, we have a right to take life, and we're going to let you set the criteria and the mechanism to put it in place, which now we know you can never do fairly and justly anyway. I get to be on both sides. When I came out of the execution chamber that night, and I'll tell you, this is the prelude that is in River Fire, that begins the book, that tells about my journey. And it was about the execution of Patrick Sonia. There are some experiences that happen to us that set us on fire. And we're never the same after that. I pray that that happens in your life early, so you know what your passion is and you know what it is you want to give your life to. But the prelude goes like this. This is called River of Fire. Here's the fire. They killed a man with fire one night. They strapped him in a wooden chair and pumped electricity through his body until he was dead. His killing was a legal act because he had killed. No religious leaders protested the killing that night, but I was there. I saw it with my own eyes. And what I saw set my soul on fire, a fire that burns in me still. And now here's an account of how I came to the killing chamber that night, the spiritual currents that brought me there. There are going to be currents in the river. There are going to be people you meet. You're going to hear. Sometimes it'll be in a class. Sometimes it's something you read. Sometimes it'll be at the liturgy of the Eucharist where you hear the gospel call. It's going to be like a little fire in your heart. And then you're going to get distracted. You're going to go on with this stuff. But then that little fire, my prayer is that that little fire will keep enkindling in your heart, that you will embrace a life of justice and passion. And so I'm going to stop here so we can have time for your questions. But it's a joy to be able to talk to you and share the stories. It's what it means when we say we're going to share our faith with each other. It's always a journey. And thank you for inviting me here. I know you didn't personally have a voice in this, but here you are today. And so I look forward to your questions. Thank you.